Hi, this is Jenny. Thank you so much for watching my series, My UnEducation, Racial Justice in America. I am up to the final segment of the MPD 150 report in which they explore alternatives to a police response. People get scared when they hear defund the police. It's not a word I picked, but that's a word that got picked, and we're not changing the word, but we're going to further describe what does that mean. Defunding the police is not something that would happen overnight. It's not like we're going to go from $193 million per year to zero, but funds are going to get pulled away from the police department and put into resources that would replace a police response. There are a lot of baby boomer officers on the cusp of retirement. After they retire, let's just not replace them, and let's instead put those salaries into other programs, non-policing programs. Or we could also institute a hiring freeze, which with every officer who leaves for whatever reason, their salaries now go into community programs. In 2016, the city of Minneapolis made their first investment in community building, putting $500,000 into the city budget for community-led safety programs in the Broadway and Little Earth communities. That's a start, but it is a drop in the bucket to the $193 million police budget that was passed for the most recent budget year. Imagine what even just 10% or $19 million of that could do in community building. So here are some of the resources that would be built by defunding the police. Mental health crisis response. It is estimated that 1 in 10 calls to 911 involves someone experiencing a mental health crisis. Unfortunately, since right now police officers are the ones responding to these calls, many people with mental health issues now also have a criminal record of low-level crimes, like disturbing the peace, misdemeanor assault, or resisting arrest. Now they've got another strike against them when applying for jobs, trying to access housing, and other ways to build their lives. Hennepin County already has a program called COPE, Community Outreach for Psychiatric Services. COPE will dispatch a qualified mental health professional to your location at any time of day or night. There's a similar one as well for youth called the Hennepin County Child Crisis. Now, both of these are woefully underfunded. Crisis Connection, which is another network of crisis hotlines that serves this area, was nearly shut down in 2017 when state legislators refused to set aside $1.4 million to continue funding it. Now, COPE does not have enough resources to deal with all of the calls they receive. Unfortunately, if all of the responders are out already taking care of other calls, people who may call and say, I need someone here, are then told to call 911. If we were to properly fund and staff the COPE hotline, these programs could grow to handle the majority of mental health crises. If they were to do that, that would also reduce 911 calls by 10%. More importantly, if mental health care were more readily accessible, we wouldn't have to wait for a mental health crisis for people to get help. Another area is homelessness. Minneapolis passed its first vagrancy law in 1900. And one role of the Minneapolis Police Department has been to round up and criminalize people who are experiencing homelessness. This remains true today. Minneapolis has criminalized a number of activities that are pretty much unavoidable for people experiencing homelessness. Begging in some locations, sleeping in vehicles, using temporary structures like tents for housing. So instead of helping people find housing, we've now made it more difficult by ensuring that they have a criminal record on top of being poor. Anytime they apply for housing, anytime they apply for a job, it's another strike against them. Minneapolis already has many agencies involved in trying to help people and families experiencing homelessness, but more needs to be done. As of the writing of the MPD 150 report in 2017, there were only 600 beds in homeless shelters in Minneapolis. Dozens of people were turned away night after night. Vacancy rates in Minneapolis hover around 2%, so finding affordable housing is also an issue. Plus, a recent study by the Wilder Foundation found that 2/3 of homeless people across the state also have a mental illness. Now, all of these services are connected. If we get people better access to affordable housing and access to mental health services, we could reduce the number of people experiencing homelessness. Okay, traffic stops, another area where the police currently respond. An ACLU study in 2015 found that Black people are 9 times more likely to be arrested during a routine traffic stop in the middle of the day than white people. Philando Castile, who lost his life at the hands of an armed police officer during a routine traffic stop, had been stopped 43 times in his 13 years leading up to his death. That's an average of a little more than 3 traffic stops per year. Many of these stops are a side effect of poverty, having a light not working, a turn signal that doesn't work, basically a car that's not in proper working order. The little good that is done by traffic stops is outweighed by the harassment and violence inflicted upon marginalized communities. So what to do instead? Many traffic violations can be handled in less confrontational ways. Many states already inform of toll violations via mail, with camera evidence of people skipping to paying tolls. So we're already handling some traffic violations by mail and by notifying people after. After all, they're not paying a toll isn't a safety violation, it's just you need to pay your fair share. Red light camera programs exist which take photos of cars driving through intersections whenever the light turns red. Once this happens, private firms or city employees review the footage and mail traffic citations to those who have run a red light. This program was tested in Minneapolis. Ironically, it was eventually abandoned, not because it reduced the number of people running red lights, which it did, but because of the number of people fighting the tickets. The courts didn't know how to manage the evidence, so the city was losing money. So this wasn't a safety issue, it was a revenue issue. Let's bring back the red light camera program to Minneapolis, and that will be one way that we can solve people who violate traffic rules in a less confrontational way. So people also wonder about speeding. Well, if you see someone speeding, what do you do? Well, when it comes to speeding through neighborhoods, already a lot of community members are taking care of their own. I live 1 block away from our local public high school, and after 3 p.m., the number of teenagers speeding through my neighborhood goes up pretty significantly. But remember, the police don't patrol my neighborhood after 3 p.m. They patrol from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. School literally gets out right at 3 o'clock. So if you're driving away from school and you're doing 40 in a 25-mile-an-hour zone, there aren't cops here to stop you anyways. Instead, what some people living around the schools have done is they have purchased those children at play, the large bright yellow plastic objects that you can put right out into the street. They put them right along where parked cars are so that people know there are kids here, you need to slow down. We've also got Blair, my amazing and fabulous neighbor who you might be talking with sometime on the corner, and she will not hesitate once to interrupt a conversation and yell, "Slow down," to anyone who's speeding on our street. Even better, we know many of those drivers, and we can talk to their parents if we see egregious speeding. So what about freeways and highways? Keep in mind, those are not patrolled by City of Minneapolis cops anyways. The Hennepin County Sheriff and Highway Patrol systems take care of those. So when it comes to really dangerous speeds, that's outside of the city purview anyways. Another area is sexual violence, assault, and rape. Using the police to respond to and solve sexual assault, rape, or other violence is engaging the police in an area of society for which they are honestly not equipped. The number of stories coming out of Minneapolis of women who are reporting a rape, who were belittled, who were asked, what were you wearing? Were you drinking? What had you said to the person who assaulted them while the police officers were taking report with no questions about the suspect is absolutely staggering. And there is evidence that police officers commit sexual assault at a higher rate than the general population. They're protected by their badge and their authority from prosecution. This problem, unfortunately, is not well documented because of the number of victims who do not come forward. However, when a police officer is finally publicized as also being a sexual predator, victims come out of the woodwork. Sexual abuse is the second most reported form of police misconduct after excessive force. In the meantime, at the other end of the spectrum, when we look at police as responding to a crisis, maintaining the peace, and criminal justice, only 1% of rapes nationwide result in a conviction. Surely an agency that just focuses on sex crimes can do better than this. One equipped with people especially trained to speak to victims, with counselors at the ready to help in the emotional aftermath, while investigators work in the background to solve these crimes. Another area of concern is substance abuse and use. Ever since Nixon declared himself the law and order president and declared a war on drugs, society has used this to criminalize communities of color, locking millions of people up and making billions of dollars for private prison corporations. Keep in mind, we are the only developed nation that has a privately run prison system. These actions have done nothing to reduce the availability of drugs or prevent the harm that can come from drug use. There are mountains of research about the discrepancies in this criminal justice system in how addicts are treated. Someone with a cocaine addiction, which is typically a white suburban drug of choice, gets less harsh sentence than someone with a crack addiction, which tends to be the drug of choice of urban Black communities. Also, with the over-policing of communities of color, the number of Blacks arrested for drug charges are significantly higher than that of whites. There is so much on this. This report, the MPD 150 report, only skims on the surface of it. I beg of you, uneducate yourself by watching the movie 13th, which was released in 2016. It was directed by Ava DuVernay, one of my absolutely favorite directors of all time. It's on Netflix right now. It's an important film to watch. If you don't watch it, keep this one statistic in mind and wonder what is up with our society. The United States makes up 5% of the world's population, and yet we make up 25% of all people imprisoned around the world. More importantly, criminalizing drug abuse is treating a health problem like a criminal problem. What drug abusers need isn't jail time. What they need are treatment programs and mental health resources. There are an incredible number of organizations doing important work to help people with substance abuse problems. These programs need to be better funded, 24-hour hotlines made available for them. So this is where the MPD 150 report ends. It does address other areas. More than anything, they're showing these as examples for readers to think about a society without police, where communities police themselves, poverty is alleviated, housing is plentiful, and resources for communities' mental and physical health are easily accessible. If we are to fix those things, there's so much that wouldn't happen from a criminal aspect. We have been trained as a society, as white people who trust the police, to rely on them to solve so many issues. And yet they're not trustworthy to a significant part of our community. They are the problem for them that needs to be solved. Let's think outside the box and let's work together to create solutions that will eliminate policing from Minneapolis. Thank you so much for watching this series. I'm so glad to have you along for the journey, and I'm excited to be a part of the change that is going to be coming. Thank you.